You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you. Chapter 63. Huyenjua lures Guanxing in the moonlight, Song Jiang arrests Sua Chao in a snowstorm. At Daming, the bandits attacked the town every day, but the government troops inside dared not sally forth for combat. Sua Chao had not yet recovered from the arrow wound, and could not take part in the fighting. Song Jiang was disappointed at the delay in taking the town, and one night he was sitting in his tent reading by candlelight the heavenly books he had received from the Taoist mystic goddess, when his orderly entered and said that Wu Yong wished to see him. When Wu Yong entered he said, "We have been besieging this town for a long time, and it is strange that no troops have come to relieve the town. We know that 3 horsemen left the town, and I expect they carried dispatches asking for help. As Grand Secretary Liang is son-in-law to Prime Minister Kai Jing, the latter must send relief at once. But as no troops have arrived here, it is possible that they have gone to Liangshan Marsh, and are adopting the military strategy, as used in saving the Zhao by besieging the capital of the Wei. In that case, what shall we do? That is a possibility which we must not overlook. Would it not be better if we quietly sent some of our men back?" Just then Dai Zong, the divine traveler, came in and spoke. "A large army of imperial troops have arrived at Liangshan Marsh, in charge of General Guanxing. Our leaders there cannot decide as to what should be done, but they ask you at least to send some men back to relieve the assault." "Though this is the position," said Wu Yong, "we must not send all our men back at once. Tonight we can order our foot soldiers to start off on the return journey. The cavalry must be left here, and be so divided up that the enemy will not notice our reduced numbers. If the imperial troops in the town find out our position, they would renew their attacks with greater vigor." "What you say is quite true," said Song Jiang. He gave orders that Huarong should take charge of 500 men, and encamp on the left of the Feihu Gully, while Lin Chong should encamp on the right-hand side of the same village with another 500 men. Huyenjua should post his artillery about 3 li from the town, and in case of any attack from the government troops he must at once open fire. All the other men must disperse, and return individually to Liangshan Marsh, and were not to fight with any imperial troops they might meet on the way. This movement took place secretly in the night, and by about 10 a.m. the following morning most of the brigands were quietly making their way towards Liangshan Marsh. But the troops inside the town discovered the movement of the brigands, and Grand Secretary Liang was duly informed of this, and he summoned his 2 generals for a conference. "I think that this movement indicates that the imperial troops are attacking Liangshan Marsh," said General Li Cheng, "and this has forced the brigands to withdraw their men from here. We must embrace this opportunity to attack them and capture Song Jiang." Just at this point a messenger arrived with a dispatch from the Prime Minister at the eastern capital stating that an attack was being made upon Liangshan Marsh, and that if the brigands withdrew from Daming Prefecture the troops in the town should immediately attack them. Grand Secretary Liang therefore ordered his generals to pursue the brigands. The imperial troops shortly afterwards left the town for an assault, but when they had only gone a short distance they were fired upon by artillery at their rear. At this Generals Wenda and Li Qing were surprised and called a halt. Looking back they saw numerous flags flying, and heard many drums and gongs sounded as though there were many brigands there. While they were still wondering what to do they were attacked from 2 sides by the brigands in charge of Huarong and Lin Chong. General Li Qing was afraid of a trap, and gave orders for a retreat to the town. The attack was so fierce, however, that the troops were just able to reach the town gates in the nick of time. The brigands who were on their way to Liangshan Marsh found their roads blocked by imperial troops, and could not reach their destination. So Song Jiang collected them together in a secluded place, and sent a messenger secretly to Liangshan Marsh informing them where he was, and giving orders for a joint attack to be made from both sides. At Liangshan Marsh Zhang Heng and Zhang Shun were in charge of a fort on the bank of the lake. When Song Jiang's order was made known Zhang Heng spoke to his brother, "We have been here a long time, but so far have had no chance of doing anything. Now General Guanxing's army is approaching by 3 roads to attack us. How would it be if we attack his camp and capture the general himself? Then our reputation would be much enhanced. We are only in charge of this fort, replied Zhang Shun, and if we do not get help from the other leaders we should be in great disgrace if we lost. If we are so circumspect, what day can we achieve a meritorious deed, said Zhang Heng. You need not take part in this. I will do it by myself this very night. Zhang Shun remonstrated with his brother without effect. That night Zhang Heng took 50 boats, with 5 men on each armed with bamboo poles, spears, and swords, and clad in light short clothing. It was a cold frosty night with very little moonlight. The boats were taken across the lake, and the men disembarked. It was about 11 p.m., and General Guanxing was reading a book in his tent. One of his scouts entered, and reported that many boats had just come across the lake, and that the men were now making their way through the reeds and grasses towards the camp. General Guanxing smiled at this, and turning to his adjutant spoke quietly some secret word. Zhang Heng and his 250 men made stealthy progress through the reeds towards Guanxing's camp, and removed sundry obstacles placed there as part of the defenses of the camp. In the camp they saw the general's tent, well lighted by lamps, and the general himself reading a book and stroking his beard. Zhang Heng saw no soldiers about, so he ran forward with his long spear in his hand. He had not gone into the tent when a gong was sounded, and there was such an outburst of shouting that it seemed as though both heaven and earth were falling to pieces. Zhang Heng was alarmed, and turned to retreat. But it was too late. He was seized, and also all his men were surrounded and captured. They were all taken before General Guanxing, who laughed when he saw them. You rabble of brigands! How dare you visit me like this? He ordered Zhang Heng to be placed in a prisoner's cart, and the rest to be put under guard. At Liangshan Marsh, Zhang Shun went to the headquarters where the leaders were assembled, and told them what had occurred to his brother. Upon hearing this, Ron VII was excited, and said, "We are all in the same boat, and we must at once rescue our elder brother. Why did you not rescue him yourself? I and my brothers must go at once to rescue him." It was done without any orders, said Zhang Shun, and therefore I dared not go with him. If you wait for orders from our commander-in-chief before you act, then you will be too late to save your brother, said Ron VII. Zhang Shun and the 3 brothers Ron thereupon embarked their men, and about 3 a.m. 100 boats were filled with men, and went across the lake. The scouts of the imperial troops, seeing this fleet, with armed men, immediately informed Guanxing. He laughed, and said, "These slaves are stupid." He turned and whispered orders to his adjutant again. The brigands disembarked, and as they approached the camp they saw many lights burning, but not a single man. The brothers Ron were startled, and decided to retreat. But a gong was sounded, but immediately soldiers sprang forth from hiding places on all sides. The brigands were quite surrounded, and Zhang Shun, being near the boats, dived into the water at once. He and about 4 others escaped in this way, but all the others were taken prisoners. Upon the news of the disaster reaching Liangshan Marsh, Lu Tang ordered Zhang Shun at once to make his way by swimming to Song Jiang's secluded camp. Upon arriving there, Zhang Shun told the news, and Song Jiang discussed with Wu Yong how they could repel General Guanxing's army. "Tomorrow we must have a trial of strength with these imperial troops," said Wu Yong. While they were talking of their plans, the sound of drums was heard, and Wu Yong was surprised as it indicated that General Xianzan was approaching to attack the secluded camp. Song Jiang marched all his men out to meet the attack, and met then the imperial troops. He turned to his men and asked, "Who will go for single combat?" In response, Huarong spurred his horse forward to engage in combat with General Xianzan. That general was ready, and they engaged in a fight. After about 10 bouts, Huarong decided on a change of tactics. After delivering a blow with his sword, he wheeled round and retreated. He now took his bow and arrow, and turning in his saddle shot at General Xianzan, who was pursuing him. The general saw the movement, and lifting his sword caught the flying arrow with it. Huarong saw that he had failed, so immediately took another arrow, and shot it at the general, who was now quite close. This time the general saw the arrow, and bent down on his horse, and the arrow just missed him. But the general realized the great skill of Huarong, and decided to run no further risks. He turned his horse and went back to his men. Huarong, seeing this, also turned and pursued the general. Again he shot an arrow, but this struck the brass plate on the general's back and did no damage. Now the general rushed back to his camp and reported the feat to Guanxing. General Guanxing ordered his attendant to bring his fiery horse. He rode forth with his great halberd in his hand. Song Jiang saw the fine martial bearing of the man, and turning round called out, "He is indeed a great hero." Lin Cheng, hearing this expression, was annoyed, and called out, "We brothers, since we joined at Liangshan Marsh, we have taken part in many fights, and so far have never been daunted in any contact. Today we are not to be despised." So saying, he whipped his horse and rushed forward to fight. General Guanxing, seeing this, called out, "You brigands, it is not worthwhile for me to fall on you. I want Song Jiang to come forward and explain why he has rebelled." Song Jiang, hearing this, called Lin Cheng to return, and then rode forward himself. He halted in front of General Guanxing, and saluting said, "I am now waiting for your questions." "You were a clerk in a yamen," shouted General Guanxing. "How dare you rebel in this way?" "The imperial affairs are in disorder," replied Song Jiang, "and corrupt officials are in power, loyal men are ignored, and covetous men are employed. This results in the suffering of the people. We are the agents of heaven, and have no personal aims." Guanxing shouted, "It is clear that you are a brigand. Which heaven has appointed you? My troops carry out the Son of Heaven's wish, but you have only fine words on your side. If you don't dismount at once, I will have you cut into many pieces." Upon hearing this, Qin Ming was angry, and dashed from the rear on horseback. At the same moment Lin Cheng did the same. Guanxing, however, stood his ground, and fought with the two. The three horses circled round like a small whirlwind. Song Jiang called to the gongs to summon the two leaders to come back, and when they returned, Qin Ming protested, "We could have captured that man. Why did you stop us?" Song Jiang replied in a loud voice, "We are honest and upright, and we do not like to see two men attacking one. It is not fair. If you had captured him, you could not capture his mind. He is a loyal and devoted official, and the spirits of his ancestors must be very proud of him. If we could win him over, I would immediately resign in his favor." Both Qin Ming and Lin Cheng could say nothing against this. That day nothing further was done, and both armies retired to their bases. Upon reaching his camp, General Guanxing doffed his armor and sat down in silent meditation. "I would have been defeated by those two men, but when they were on the point of seizing me, Song Jiang summoned them to return. I wonder why he did that." So he sent for both the prisoners Zhang Heng and Ruan VII, and then asked them, "Song Jiang previously was only a clerk in a magistrate's yamen, so why do you men serve him so faithfully?" Ruan VII replied, "Our leader Song Jiang is famous in Shandong and Hebei as the protector. You do not know honest and upright men, and therefore cannot recognize such men when you meet them." General Guanxing bowed his head, but did not speak except ordering the prisoners to be taken back. That night he was restless, and as he could not sleep, he got up and strolled round his camp in the moonlight. It was a cold night, and hoarfrost covered the ground. Shortly an orderly came and said that a general had arrived and wished to speak to him. "What is his name?" asked General Guanxing. "He would not tell me that," said the orderly. "He is, however, unarmed and without armor." "In that case you can admit him," said the general. In a short time the man was brought to his tent. General Guanxing trimmed his lamp so as to get a clear view of the man, and thought the face was familiar. He, however, asked for his name. "Can we talk together privately?" asked the man. General Guanxing laughed at this and said, "I am commander-in-chief of these 100,000 soldiers, and we are all united together with one mind. If we were not of one mind, how could I command them? They are all familiar with my affairs, and I keep no secrets from them. You can talk to me without any hesitation." "I am Huyanzhua," said the man, and was previously a general in the imperial army, and was once appointed to attack the brigand at Liangshan Marsh. They captured me by a ruse, and all my army was annihilated so that I dared not go back. Yesterday I heard that you had arrived here, and I was much pleased. This morning you were attacked by Qin Ming and Lin Chong, but Song Jiang summoned them to return as he was afraid that they might wound you. He had the idea that at some time he might surrender to you, but the others would not agree with him. Just now I have had a secret conversation with Song Jiang, and discussed how we might make all the others surrender to you. So if you are willing we can suggest a plan. Tomorrow night you may come to our camp by a small bypath, lightly armed, to capture Lin Chong and the other bandits. By this not only you will gain great credit, but Song Jiang and I may also redeem our guilt. General Guanxing was much pleased at this, and invited Hu Yanzhua to drink wine with him. Hu Yanzhua talked very much of the honesty and justice of Song Jiang, and dwelled upon his hard luck which had forced him to become a brigand. The next day General Guanxing spoke to Hu Yanzhua, "As you have a certain plot for this evening, it would be better if I attacked and defeated the brigands today." Hu Yanzhua donned his armor, and rode to the front of the imperial army. When Song Jiang saw him he cursed him, "We never treated you unfairly, why did you desert us last night? Previously you were only a petty officer, so how could you undertake a big affair now?" replied Hu Yanzhua. Song Jiang did not reply to this insult, but ordered Huang Xian to engage in single combat with Hu Yanzhua. The two fought for about 10 bouts, and then Hu Yanzhua hit Huang Xian a severe blow with his bludgeon, and knocked him off his horse. General Guanxing was much pleased at this, and ordered a general attack. But Hu Yanzhua said this was not advisable, because Wu Yong was full of tricks, which he would use if his men were hard pressed. General Guanxing agreed and ordered a retreat to their camp. Upon reaching the camp, Generals Guanxing and Hu Yanzhua drank wine in the former's tent, and there the general asked about the opponent who apparently had been killed. "That man Huang Xian was previously a lieutenant general in the imperial army," replied Hu Yanzhua. "He joined the brigands at the same time as Qin Ming and Hua Rong. He is at variance with Song Jiang about many questions, and perhaps that is why Song Jiang today ordered him to attack me, so that he would get killed and be removed out of his way." General Guanxing was pleased to hear this. He issued orders that Generals Xianzan and Hao Siwen at 11 o'clock that night should lead 500 cavalry as a reserve on an attack on Song Jiang's camp. At the appointed time everything was ready. The iron accoutrements on horses and men had been taken off so that less noise would be made. Each man had a small gag in his mouth to prevent any talking. Hu Yanzhua mounted his horse and led the way. It was a bright moonlight night. They had traveled for about an hour, and upon turning round a mountain they encountered a party of about 50 mounted brigands who called, "Are you not Hu Yanzhua's men?" Hu Yanzhua told the men not to speak, but just follow him. He then whipped his horse and galloped forward, followed by General Guanxing and his men. They had soon passed round another ridge of the mountain, and then Hu Yanzhua halted and pointed to a red lamp burning in the distance on the mountain. "Where is that red lamp burning?" asked the general. "That is in Song Jiang's camp," replied Hu Yanzhua. They proceeded on their way, but when fairly near the red camp a bomb was fired, and General Guanxing galloped forward and called his men to follow him. But when they reached the red lamp they found nobody there, and even Hu Yanzhua had vanished. General Guanxing was startled and realized that he had been deceived. He turned round and ordered a retreat. But now gongs and drums were heard on all sides. The path was soon lost, and the general saw his men scattering in all directions, so that soon he had only about 10 men with him. As they turned the spur of the mountain another bomb was fired, and he now saw a large body of armed brigands blocking his way. He was soon surrounded by men armed with hooked poles, and with these they caught hold of his clothes and pulled him off his horse. They seized his great halberd and horse, bound his arm, and pushed him forward towards their camp. Lin Chong and Hua Rong led another attacking party to cut off Guanxing's reserve forces in charge of Lieutenant General Xianzan, who fought for about 20 bouts in the bright moonlight. At the end Xianzan was almost exhausted, and turning his horse tried to escape. But the 10 feet of green, Hu Senyang had been watching this at one side, and she now threw her red silk lasso, caught Xianzan, and brought him off his horse. He was seized by the men around, and was also taken to the brigands' camp as a prisoner. We will now see what had happened to the brigands led by Qin Ming, and Sun Li against the reserve force of the imperial troops under Lieutenant General Hao Siwen. When they met on the road, Hao Siwen reviled the brigands. "If you brigands obstruct my progress, you will certainly die. If you wish to live, then withdraw at once." Qin Ming was angry at this speech, lashed his horse, and dashed forward for single combat. They fought for a long time, and then Sun Li went forward to assist Qin Ming. When Hao Siwen saw he had two opponents, he was undecided what to do, and was off his usual guard. Qin Ming seized the opportunity, and knocked Hao Siwen off his horse, who was immediately seized by the brigands. Liang led other brigands to the camp of the imperial troops, where they overcome the guard, released Ron VII and Zhang Heng, and took away all the stores, fodder, and accoutrements. It was near daybreak when all was finished, and Song Jiang ordered all to start for Liangshan Marsh. Upon arriving there, all the leaders assembled in the Loyalty and Justice Hall, where the three captured generals were brought. Song Jiang came forward to meet the generals, and released them himself. He conducted General Guansheng, and made him sit in his own chair. He then bowed and saluted the general and said, "We ruffians have offended your dignity, and beg for your pardon." Hu Yanjue now stepped forward, bowed, saluted, and then addressed the general. "I acted under orders from my commanding officer whom I dared not disobey. I hope that you will forgive me for deceiving you." General Guanxing looked round on all the assembled leaders, and realized that they were all actuated by upright principles. He turned round and spoke to his two lieutenant generals. "We are prisoners here. What can we do?" "We will follow your orders," they replied. "We are too disgraced to return to the capital," said General Guanxing to Song Jiang. "Let us have an early death." "Why do you talk like that?" asked Song Jiang. "If you do not despise our lowly calling, perhaps you might join us to carry out the will of heaven. But if you are unwilling to do so, then we will not detain you here, but allow you to return to the capital. Many people have said that you are loyal and just, but now I know that that remark is true," said General Guansheng. "In this life, if the emperor treats me well, I will support him. If a friend treats me well, I will support him too. Now, as I am undetermined, I will stay here in the capacity of an ordinary soldier." Song Jiang was much pleased and ordered a feast to be prepared in honor of the general. He also ordered all the prisoners to be brought to Liangshan Marsh and to be well treated. Those soldiers who wished to return home were allowed to do so, and presented with money for traveling expenses. A man was also sent to take the family of General Guanxing to join him at Liangshan Marsh. During the aforementioned feast, Song Jiang remembered that Lu Junyi and Shirxiu were still in the prison at the northern capital, Daming, so he shed tears. Wu Yong then spoke to Song Jiang, "Brother, do not be downhearted. I have a plan of rescuing our brothers. Tomorrow morning we may dispatch men to assist in the final attack on Daming." Upon hearing this, General Guanxing stood up and said, "I have not yet had the opportunity of recompensing you for your generosity. Please allow me to take charge of this movement." Song Jiang was much pleased and agreed to this. Guanxing's troops were now enrolled as brigands and were placed in charge of Hao Siwen and Xianzan, who were under General Guanxing. They were to be the vanguard in the new attack on Daming. In the northern capital, Grand Secretary Liang was now dining with Sua Chao. It was a dull day with a strong wind blowing. A scout entered and reported that General Guanxing and all his troops had been captured and moreover had all joined the brigands. They were now all advancing towards the Daming prefecture. When Liang heard this, he was astounded and dropped the wine cup he was holding at the moment. "I was wounded by an arrow from the brigands, and now must have my revenge," said Sua Chao. Grand Secretary Liang filled up a cup with wine, and presented it to Sua Chao, saying, "Take the troops to encounter immediately." It was now the middle of winter, and the weather was very cold with strong winds. The hooves of the horses were frozen, and the armor was as cold as ice when they left the town. Song Jiang had taken up his position on a mound where he could watch the pending battle. The brigands under Guanxing soon faced the troops under Sua Chao. The latter did not recognize Guanxing, but his officers told him that fact. Sua Chao did not make any remark, but dashed forward on his horse. Guanxing also did the same, and the two fought. After about 10 bouts, Lieutenant General Li Qing saw that Sua Chao was getting the worst of the combat, so he galloped forward to assist him. But Xianzan and Hao Siwen on the other side, seeing this move, also came forward to assist Guanxing. Now the 5 horses were so close together that it was hard to follow individual movements. Song Jiang, seeing this from his mound, ordered a general advance, and the brigands attacked the imperial troops and drove them back towards the city. When they were close to the gates, Song Jiang signaled for a cessation of hostilities. The following day was very cloudy, and it seemed like it was going to rain. Sua Chao led his troops outside the city, and Wu Yong ordered the brigands to put up a trifling defense. If pressed, they were to retire. Thus Sua Chao won a slight victory, but ordered a retreat. That evening the clouds were heavier and quite low, and a big wind also sprang up. This was soon followed by a heavy fall of snow. Seeing this, Wu Yong ordered a party of men to proceed to a defile in the hills near the town where a narrow road passed through, and there make pitfalls which, when finished, were to be covered over with earth. This was done. It snowed all night, and next morning the snow was deep enough to reach to the horses' knees. In the morning Sua Chao went to the city wall to view the enemy. He noticed that owing to the snow the horses moved with difficulty and were in some disorder. He therefore ordered 300 of his cavalry to start a sudden raid. The mounted brigands, upon seeing the cavalry, scattered in all directions. Song Jiang had ordered Li Jun and Zhang Shun to leave off their armor and go out for single combat. They opposed Sua Chao, but soon threw away their spears and bolted after their men. Sua Chao was hasty and pursued these men, who induced Sua Chao towards the concealed pitfalls. The narrow path was on the bank of the river, and upon reaching that part the 2 men dismounted and jumped into the river as though to escape from Sua Chao. In the water Li Jun called out, "Brother Song Jiang, get away quickly," and Sua Chao, hearing this, dashed forward along the road towards the point where he thought Song Jiang was, and fell into one of the pitfalls, and at once brigands were on the scene from all sides. Even if Sua Chao had had 6 arms and 3 heads, he could not have got away. White sheets of snow like silver, as pure as broken jade, concealed a cunning pitfall, as good as man made.